Friday afternoon, I'd like to welcome in John Taylor, Chairman of Twin River. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time to come into the studio. I'm sure it's been a busy week. Seems like it's been even longer since the Supreme Court said that states could allow sports betting on a state-by-state basis. Talk with us about where Twin River has been at anticipating this and sort of what's since this announcement.
So, frankly, I was one of those people who thought that the Supreme Court would issue a more nuanced decision, and that an outright repeal probably wouldn't happen. So I was wrong, but fortunately, we've been doing some work to begin the planning process from a staffing perspective and a kind of location of where we thought this might be.
So let's talk a little bit about facility-wise. It's almost like, you know, back in the day when it went from slots to table games, you had to envision what that looked like at the facility. Talk with us about how you envision this rolling out.
So from a facility perspective, I think most people think about sports books in Las Vegas as big rooms with many TVs and individual seats where people sit down. And what we have seen recently is that more and more people are going to more social environments, more sports bars. And that's what we've begun to plan.
And you talk about the planning stages. Does this entail new construction at Lincoln?
So we have some existing space that we think can be quickly retrofitted to get up and running as soon as possible, and then we likely would go in a kind of phase 2 and ultimately 3 to build it out.
So not like, as you said, a Vegas sports book, more of a bar-esque environment, more social?
Much more of a sports bar. With individual locations where people can go sit on a couch with their friends and watch a game on, still lots of TVs.
I was going to say, I have to imagine a lot of TVs.
Still lots of TVs and lots of screens, but much more of a social environment than what people think of in a traditional Las Vegas sportsbook.
And so you talk about taking that look in Lincoln. What does it look like in Tiverton?
Unfortunately, Tiverton is a much smaller facility, and we were constrained by the site that we're in. So it'll be a much smaller space. It'll be where we had envisioned a simulcast center, so not as extensive space as what we'll have in Lincoln.
Do you think patrons have really been clamoring for this, looking for this sort of opportunity? What had you heard from folks in sort of the weeks and months leading up to the Supreme Court decision?
So we're excited about the possibility of introducing the facility to a different demographic. So 5 years ago, when we first got table games, the space, our facility was, much older, leaned a little bit more female than male. And then we got table games, and we got a younger player, 47 to 50. And with sports betting, we expect that to come down even a little lower. So we're excited about the possibilities of introducing the facility to a new demographic.
Let's talk a little bit about time frame. We did just see them deliberate the budget article this week in legislation as well. Is it just a matter of state approval now?
So the state's going through a process right now of identifying a technology provider and a bookmaker who will provide those services, will provide the environment in which the game will happen. Actually, today's the day that bids come back for those.
They move pretty quick.
They do. They do move quick. So later today, those bids will come back, and the state will go through the process of evaluation. So hopefully, within the next 4 to 6 weeks, they'll know who their provider is, and then we'll get together and figure out how quickly we can get it going.
And let's talk a little bit about what the state was anticipating. Obviously, not your end of the bargain to be budgeting what's going to happen at the casinos, but a big number, looking at $500 million in gross gaming receipts to get to the number that the governor has budgeted. Do you think that's reasonable?
So I think in terms of what they budgeted, I wasn't aware of where they came up with their assumptions and what they were built on. I think they've gone through a very deliberate process of trying to learn about the business and how it'll work. This RFP certainly will inform them in terms of what the market is. And I think as all this comes together, we'll have we will have a much better sense of what the revenue possibilities are at a gross level, and then how those all flow through the system. I will say that sports betting is one of those products where if a player can get better odds somewhere else, they'll go.
So is this going to be a competition amongst Connecticut, Rhode Island, Mass, like any of the other current competition right now?
Yes, it will, and as well as the black market. So if someone thinks that the odds at Twin River are less favorable than the odds in Massachusetts or Connecticut, they may consider that. If they're less favorable than what they're finding online with these offshore providers, maybe they go there, or maybe to the local bar where they've probably been playing
I've been playing all along
for some
So
time.
how does that look from a running a casino perspective? Now this is the Wild West, if you will. Clearly keeping tabs on the odds at other casinos.
So again, from a bookmaking perspective and from a technology perspective, that will be provided by the Rhode Island Lottery.
Okay.
So what we're responsible for is creating the best environment we can where people feel comfortable, and we want that experience to be as seamless as it possibly can be. So someone who's playing on one of our tables or playing a slot machine or playing in the sports book, we want them to feel like they have the same experience with the same level of customer service.
And so you talk about the RFPs being due today. If you're a betting guy, how quickly do you think this moves? Are we talking weeks?
So I can only speak to from our perspective. So the space that we've identified to start with is something that we feel could be retrofitted reasonably quickly. Remember, when we take something that is maybe an existing bar, the corner of an existing bar, and it's going to have a gaming product in it, we have to put cameras and all of the things that go along with creating that environment. So that'll be the biggest issue that we need to get through. So I think in the governor's budget there was discussion about an October 1 start date. From our perspective, at some level we should be able to be ready.
And let's talk a little bit as well. We're talking about on the premises a sports book at Twin River. Obviously things that have been floated around the country and other states, as well as sort of that online component. How does that fit into the grand scheme of things, and what are you keeping an eye on from Twin River?
So from our perspective, we're very interested in whether people should or could be able to use their mobile phones within the four walls of our facility. And the four walls of our facility includes a soon-to-be opened hotel that's going to come online later this summer. Beyond that, I think there are legal issues that need to be more fully explored by the various stakeholders in the process.
So where do those entities like a DraftKings or a FanDuel sort of play in? You're myopically focused on the casino, but clearly they're eyeing some opportunities with this opening for sports
Well,
betting.
from a state of Rhode Island perspective, it's very clear that the lottery is going to be the provider of the technology and the bookmaking services. So in Rhode Island, if they want to play, they should be kind of submitting a bid later today, and I don't know who will submit a bid, or I don't think anyone does until 4 o'clock. Beyond that, I think folks like FanDuel and DraftKings and William Hill, they all have designs on not only brick and mortar space, but beyond in terms of, can I play on my mobile phone when I'm sitting in my living room?
Now, do you have concerns about that? Is this pure competition? Is there any way to work together?
No, there's clearly a way to work together. In places like New Jersey, the casinos are part of that extension onto the mobile phone. And there are other places like Pennsylvania which are also doing that. So I think it'll be on a state-by-state basis, in terms of determining who has the rights for sports betting.
Let's talk about how business is, and especially in light of increased gaming opportunities in New England. Let's talk about a little bit how Twin River is doing compared to regionally.
So we had a tough first quarter, which was driven by the weather. March was
a little tough.
So toward the end of the quarter, things seemed to get a little better, and we're having a great May. From a competition perspective, obviously Springfield is opening in later this summer. The Wynn property, which will now be called Encore, will open in the middle of 2019. We have a competitor in Plain Ridge And you know, we've been focused on that, you know, for 6 or 7 years in terms of what we were going to do to recreate ourselves to be more competitive against those competitive offerings. And you know, the latest move, I mean, table games was a differentiator for us. You know, getting the voters to understand the value of moving the Newport license to Tiverton is really our next big move in terms of competition. At the end of the day, we're convenience operators, and you can't take away that we're going to have two very convenient locations to get people in and out of, you know, versus some of these big destination casinos. And at the end of the day, we've been successfully competing against two of the world's largest casinos in Foxwoods and Mohegan Sun, so we're up for the challenge.
And we talked a little bit in the green room before you came on, looking even at Plainfield, you thought you were going to see a little bit of a bigger hit, and it turns out you did not.
Yeah, we were thinking that it was going to be around a 12.5% decline in our business from Plainridge. It actually turned out in the first year we were just below 6%. In the second year, it was about, you know, just over a point. So we're very happy with how we've kind of weathered the first volley of competition. But you know, we're about to see two major competitors in MGM and Wynn Resorts. And but again, I think we're ready, and I think we're up for the challenge.
You said convenience matters. Let's talk a little bit about Tiverton. Time frame, expected open date.
So technically right now we're talking about October 1st. We've been doing a lot to try to pull forward the date. There's a few things that we're trying to pin down, but hopefully in the next couple of days we'll be able to come out with a new date that, you know, pulls it closer even more.
So I'm glad I had you in. Wanted to talk again about the sports gambling news out of the Supreme Court this week. How big is this for Twin River?
So, you know, I think we talked a little bit about it earlier, and what it really does is introduce a new demographic to the facility. Sports betting in Nevada represents about 2% of overall gaming revenue.
Okay.
So it's not a huge driver from a revenue perspective, but it does add, and it's an important amenity for casinos to have there. So we're looking forward to having that amenity. We think we'll do a good job with it. We know we'll do a good job with it, and we're looking forward to getting on with it.
Do you think that the leagues, we saw the statements that came out after the Supreme Court made this ruling, will get their hooks into Congress to try to get some sort of regulation for sports gaming?
So, you know, I think what they're looking for is they're looking for kind of one-stop shopping, right? Go to the federal government, set the rules of engagement.
Not deal state by state.
Yeah, not have to deal state by state. Maybe try to get some consideration around an integrity fee, as they're calling it. Personally, I don't think they'll get a lot of traction there. It's almost, you know, the horse is out of the barn. You know?
Well, it's kind of like Orrin Hatch, who's
Yeah.
almost out.
So states, you know, are quickly moving. I mean, Delaware had a flavor or a version of sports betting, which was just parlay cards. I saw something this morning that they're going to move forward to more traditional sports betting very quickly. New Jersey's ready to go. Pennsylvania's ready to go. We have a property in Mississippi, and the regulations were issued yesterday, and they're pushing very hard to go. I think, you know, the time for congressional action was sometime between 1992 and this past Monday.
That ship has sailed.
And that didn't happen.
That ship has sailed. Do you count Rhode Island in those states that are at the forefront now of?
I think so. Yeah.
Forward?
I think the governor's initiative of kind of moving this out when she did, you know, will pay dividends. We should be able to get a head start on Massachusetts and Connecticut. They're both still trying to figure out how they're going to run their programs. I think the lottery has a very good idea of how it wants to run its program, and you know, later today they'll get their bids back and we'll be off.
Do you think that the state should be looking to put more resources to problem gaming with another opportunity for folks to bet?
That's definitely been part of the conversation. Both if you were to look at the RFP that they put out to the providers of the services that they're going out to bid for, it was front and center. We've had our own conversations with the lottery about that. It's a little it's an important issue and it needs to be addressed. The closer you get to someone's wallet or their phone, and the easier it is for them to participate, the more you have to be focused on, what society's responsibilities are vis-a-vis the product. So to start, it'll be kind of four-walled brick and mortar. We have existing programs for all of our players. All of our frontline people are trained at how to identify a problem gambler and what to do about that. When it goes beyond the four walls into, people's living rooms, I think there's a different level of responsibility that goes along with that.
And just one, last question about the number that the state's looking at, JT. It's a large number, of gross gaming receipts. You talk about a younger demographic looking to game. But as the state takes a look at it, is this a whole new pile of money that these young folks are bringing to the table? Or, should the state maybe weigh carefully that instead of going out to TGI Fridays and spending $50, $100 there, they're coming and gaming, and that's still the same $100 that isn't going to dining and taxable receipts?
Yeah, I'm not, it's going to be interesting. I think we're all trying to figure this out. Depending on what you read, there's somewhere between 150 and 400 billion of illegal sports wagering that's going on in the United States right now. So to your point, are they doing it already, and is this a way for government to provide a more legitimate game, or is it going to be? Are you going to introduce a bunch of new players? And I think the industry as a whole is beginning to look at those kinds of issues, including us.
Well, it's going to be interesting moving forward. Again, just seems like it's been longer than a week, but hearing again about the Supreme Court ruling. So, anything else you want folks to know about the casino life while you're here?
So, Tiverton, hopefully open in September, October, and the hotel in Lincoln should be opened at some point in August.
Okay, very good. Keeping an eye on Twin River with, again, the big national story of the Supreme Court allowing states to move forward with sports gambling. John Taylor, thank you for coming in today.
Thanks so much.
Don't go anywhere. We're going to be right back with Ray Rickman, former state representative, deputy secretary of state, now with Stages of Freedom, will give us Big View.